The campus stretched out before Marcus Rivera like a sleeping giant, its Gothic towers and modern glass buildings catching the amber glow of security lights. At 11:30 on a Tuesday night, most students had retreated to their dorms or cramped apartments, leaving only the dedicated few burning the midnight oil in the library and the occasional group stumbling back from downtown bars. Marcus adjusted his security guard uniform and checked his radio one more time before beginning his hourly patrol. The fabric felt foreign against skin that had once worn desert camouflage, and the lightweight gear seemed almost comical compared to the 40 pounds of equipment he used to carry through the mountains of Afghanistan. But this job paid the bills, kept regular hours, and most importantly, let him be home when Sophia and Elena woke up for school. His daughters. Even now, walking these quiet pathways, he could picture them sleeping peacefully in their shared bedroom, stuffed animals clutched tight and homework laid out on their desks for morning review. 8 years old and already showing the determination he recognized from their mother. Maria would have been proud of how they were growing up, though she never could have imagined they would be doing it without her. The memory hit him like it always did, sudden and sharp. The phone call from the hospital. The drunk driver who ran the red light. The funeral where 2 6-year-old girls asked why mommy wouldn't wake up. Marcus pushed the thoughts away and focused on the present moment, a technique his therapist had taught him during those dark months when the nightmares from overseas mixed with the fresh grief of losing Maria. He turned the corner past the Student Union building and spotted a figure hunched over textbooks at one of the outdoor study tables. A young woman with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, surrounded by highlighters and energy drink cans. She looked up nervously as his footsteps approached, relaxing slightly when she saw his uniform. "Evening," Marcus said quietly, not wanting to startle her further. "You doing okay out here?" She nodded quickly, gathering her materials. "Just finishing up some studying." "I know it's late." "No problem at all. Just want to make sure you're safe." "You have someone walking you back to your dorm?" The question seemed to make her uncomfortable. She shook her head and began stuffing papers into her backpack with unnecessary urgency. Marcus recognized the signs of someone who had learned to be afraid, and it stirred something protective deep in his chest. "I can escort you if you'd like," he offered. "It's what I'm here for." Before she could answer, his radio crackled with a routine check-in from the main security office. As he responded, Marcus noticed the young woman had stopped packing and was looking over his shoulder with genuine fear in her eyes. He turned to follow her gaze and saw 3 figures approaching from the direction of Fraternity Row, their voices carrying across the quiet quad with the particular arrogance that came from too much alcohol and too little consequence. "Where in the world are you watching from tonight, and what would you want someone to do if this was happening to your daughter or sister?" The leader of the group was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. His companions flanked him like eager deputies, feeding off his energy and emboldening his swagger. Marcus had seen this dynamic countless times in the military, during college years that felt like a lifetime ago, and unfortunately, in the brief glimpses he caught of the privileged students who seemed to own this campus. Well, Rebecca," the leader called out, his voice carrying the kind of false friendliness that made Marcus's jaw clench. "Studying hard or hardly studying?" The young woman, Rebecca, had gone completely still, her knuckles white as she gripped her backpack straps. Derek Manning strutted across the quad with the confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. His family's name was engraved on half the buildings at this university, a fact he never let anyone forget. The alcohol in his system only amplified his sense of invincibility as he spotted his favorite target hunched over her books like some kind of academic hermit. "Rebecca Chen," he drawled, drawing out each syllable as his friends snickered behind him. "Still playing hard to get, I see." Marcus watched the interaction unfold, every instinct he had developed over years of military service and fatherhood screaming that this situation was about to escalate. He had dealt with enough bullies in his life to recognize the predatory gleam in the young man's eyes. This wasn't innocent college flirtation. This was a hunting party. Rebecca kept her eyes fixed on her textbook, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please just leave me alone, Derek. I have a test tomorrow. Oh, come on, Derek said, moving closer to her table. Don't be like that. You know you want to hang out with us. We're having a little party back at the house. Much more fun than whatever boring pre-med stuff you're studying. His friends spread out slightly, creating a loose semicircle around Rebecca's table. Marcus recognized the tactical positioning immediately. Whether they realized it or not, they were cutting off her escape routes. His hand moved instinctively to his radio, but something held him back. Years of being told to mind his own business, to not make waves, to remember his place as just the help. But then Rebecca looked up, and Marcus saw something in her expression that reminded him painfully of Sophia the night she had woken up crying about kids at school making fun of her second-hand clothes. The same mixture of fear, resignation, and desperate hope that someone, anyone, might step in and help. I said no, Derek, Rebecca repeated, her voice gaining a tiny bit of strength. I'm not interested. Derek's friendly facade cracked slightly, revealing the entitled anger underneath. You think you're too good for us? For me? My family practically built this place. Without us, you wouldn't even be here. He reached out and grabbed her textbook, holding it just out of her reach when she tried to take it back. Maybe if you're nice to me, I'll let you have it back. Maybe I'll even put in a good word with the dean about your scholarship status. The threat was clear, and Marcus felt his military training kick into high gear. His muscles tensed as he evaluated distances, angles, potential weapons in the environment. The rational part of his brain reminded him that intervening could cost him his job, his only source of income for his daughters. But the father in him, the soldier in him, the decent human being in him couldn't stand by and watch this unfold. Rebecca stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the concrete. Give me my book back. Derek laughed and tossed the textbook to one of his friends, who caught it with a theatrical flourish. Come get it, he taunted. Unless you want to be a little friendlier first. When Rebecca moved toward the friend holding her book, Derek stepped into her path, close enough that she had to crane her neck to look up at him. You know what your problem is? You think you're special. But you're just another scholarship kid who doesn't belong here. Lucky for you, I'm feeling generous tonight. He reached out to touch her face, and Rebecca flinched backward, bumping into the table behind her. Books scattered to the ground, and Marcus saw her eyes fill with tears of frustration and fear. That was enough. Marcus stepped out of the shadows cast by the student union building, his footsteps deliberate and measured. His voice carried the quiet authority he had learned commanding soldiers in combat zones, the kind of tone that made people stop and pay attention whether they wanted to or not. Is there a problem here? All four students turned toward him, but their reactions couldn't have been more different. Rebecca's face flooded with relief. Derek's friends looked uncertain, suddenly remembering they were on a college campus with rules and consequences. But Derek himself straightened up, his expression shifting to one of irritated dismissal. Derek turned toward Marcus with the lazy arrogance of someone who had never been genuinely challenged in his life. His eyes swept over the security uniform with obvious disdain, taking in the simple badge and basic equipment that marked Marcus as nothing more than hired help in his mind. Everything's fine here, Rent-A-Cop, Derek said, his words slurring slightly from the alcohol. Just having a friendly conversation with my classmate. Nothing you need to worry about. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but his trained eyes were cataloging everything. Derek was approximately 6'2", probably 200 pounds, athletic build suggesting regular gym time but no real combat experience. His stance was loose and overconfident, weight shifted forward in a way that would make him easy to unbalance. The two friends behind him were nervous, glancing between their leader and the security guard with growing uncertainty. Most importantly, Rebecca was still trapped between Derek and the table, her escape routes blocked by the positioning of the three young men. Marcus had seen this tactical setup before in different contexts, and it never ended well for the person in the middle. "Miss, are you all right?" Marcus asked, directing his question to Rebecca while keeping Derek in his peripheral vision. Years of experience had taught him that the most dangerous moment in any confrontation was when the aggressor felt his authority being questioned in front of an audience. Rebecca nodded quickly, but her hands were shaking as she tried to gather her scattered books from the ground. "I'm fine. I was just trying to get my textbook back." "She's fine," Derek interrupted, stepping closer to Marcus with that particular swagger that came from believing money could solve any problem. "Like I said, we're just talking. Maybe you should mind your own business and get back to checking locked doors or whatever it is you do around here." Marcus felt the familiar calm settle over him, the same mental state that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. Time seemed to slow slightly as his awareness expanded to include every detail of the situation. The weight of his radio on his belt. The distance to the nearest emergency call box. The fact that several students had their phones out, whether filming or preparing to call for help he couldn't tell. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back and let the young lady collect her belongings," Marcus said, his voice remaining steady and professional. "Campus policy requires that all students be allowed to move freely without harassment." Derek laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the surrounding buildings. "Campus policy? Do you have any idea who I am? Who my family is? My dad donated the money for half these buildings. I could have you fired with one phone call." One of Derek's friends tugged nervously at his sleeve. "Dude, maybe we should just go. It's getting late." But Derek shrugged him off, alcohol and entitlement combining into a toxic mixture that made him double down instead of backing away. "No, I want to teach Rent-A-Cop here about respect. About knowing his place." Marcus glanced at Rebecca, who was still crouched on the ground trying to gather her papers. Her hands were shaking worse now, and he could see tears of frustration and fear threatening to spill over. In that moment, she looked exactly like Sophia had the day she came home from school with a bloody nose, explaining through sobs that the bigger kids had pushed her down and taken her lunch money. The protective rage that filled Marcus's chest was immediate and overwhelming. Not the hot anger that led to mistakes, but the cold, focused fury that had made him effective in combat. This entitled brat thought he could terrorize a young woman simply because his family had money. Thought he could threaten someone's livelihood for doing the right thing. "Young man," Marcus said, and something in his tone made Derek's smirk falter slightly. "I'm going to ask you one more time to step back and allow this student to leave. After that, I start following protocols that neither of us wants to deal with tonight." Derek's face flushed red, whether from alcohol or indignation Marcus couldn't tell. "Protocols? Are you threatening me? Do you know what kind of lawsuit my family can bring down on this whole university?" He took another step forward, close enough now that Marcus could smell the whiskey on his breath. Close enough that any sudden movement would be considered assault. Close enough that Marcus's military training was screaming at him to neutralize the threat before it escalated further. "I'm not threatening anyone," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm doing my job, which is keeping students safe. All students." The emphasis on the last 2 words seemed to penetrate Derek's alcohol-fogged brain, and for a moment, uncertainty flickered across his features. But then he looked back at his friends, saw them watching and waiting to see how their leader would handle being challenged by mere campus security. Emma finished packing her homework with a quiet dignity that never failed to amaze Marcus. She slung her small backpack over her shoulder and looked up at her father with eyes that held no trace of self-pity despite Jake's harsh words. "I'll wait in the car, Daddy," she said softly, understanding without being told that her presence had become a problem. Marcus watched his daughter walk toward the exit, her small frame carrying herself with more grace than most adults he knew. Jake had already turned away, dismissing them both as he began preparing for his investor's arrival. The casual cruelty of the moment settled over Marcus like a familiar weight, another reminder of the careful balance required to maintain their precarious stability. 20 minutes later, Jake's guests began arriving. Marcus could hear their voices from the reception area as he worked on sanitizing the training equipment. The investors were cut from the same cloth as Jake, their conversation peppered with references to market valuations and acquisition strategies that painted the gym as just another asset in a diversified portfolio. Marcus worked methodically, wiping down the heavy bags and organizing the scattered equipment that Jake's earlier training session had left in disarray. Through the large windows separating the training area from the reception, he could see Jake gesturing animatedly as he gave his guests a tour of the facility. The entrepreneur's purple belt was prominently displayed around his waist, and he wore it like a badge of authority that validated his ownership of the space. The tour group paused near the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mats, and Jake began demonstrating basic techniques for his impressed audience. Marcus continued his cleaning routine, but his trained eye automatically analyzed Jake's movements. The entrepreneur's form was fundamentally flawed, his base too narrow, his weight distribution completely wrong. He was attempting to show a basic arm drag, but his grip placement would make the technique useless against any opponent with even minimal training. Jake's guests nodded appreciatively, clearly impressed by what they saw as expertise. One of them, a woman in an expensive business suit, asked about the gym's training programs and member retention rates. Jake launched into a rehearsed presentation about Elite Combat's premium positioning and the growing market for high-end fitness experiences. Marcus moved to the equipment storage area, where he began organizing the scattered training gear that members routinely left in haphazard piles. As he worked, he overheard Jake's boasts about his own martial arts prowess, stories that grew more elaborate with each telling. According to Jake's version of events, he had trained with world champions, competed at elite levels, and earned his purple belt through years of dedicated study under renowned masters. The reality, as Marcus had observed over months of watching Jake train, was far different. The entrepreneur's technique was sloppy, his understanding of basic principles superficial at best. He relied on strength and aggression rather than leverage and timing, the hallmarks of someone who had learned just enough to be dangerous to himself and others. One of the investors, a middle-aged man with the soft build of someone who spent his days behind a desk, expressed interest in trying a private lesson. Jake immediately agreed, promising to show him some basic self-defense techniques that could be learned in a single session. Marcus winced internally, knowing that Jake's instruction would likely do more harm than good. As Marcus organized the training equipment, he noticed several pieces that had been improperly maintained. The heavy bag's mounting hardware was loose, creating a safety hazard that could result in serious injury if the bag fell during training. The grappling mats were positioned incorrectly, with gaps between sections that could catch feet and cause twisted ankles. Marcus automatically began correcting these problems, his military training making it impossible to ignore potential dangers. Jake's demonstration continued on the main mats, his voice growing louder as he attempted to impress his audience with increasingly complex techniques. Marcus watched peripherally as the entrepreneur attempted an armbar setup that was so fundamentally wrong it would have been comical if not for the safety implications. Jake's training partner, the same young man from earlier, gamely played along despite the obvious discomfort of being manipulated by someone who clearly didn't understand proper joint manipulation. Marcus finished organizing the equipment and moved on to cleaning the locker rooms. The work gave him time to think about Emma waiting in the car, about the long drive home to their small apartment, and about the choices that had brought them to this point. He had given up a career that commanded respect, traded his uniform for a janitor's coveralls, and accepted the invisibility that came with service work. All for Emma, all to provide her with the stability she needed to build her own future. The sound of laughter from the main training area drew Marcus's attention back to Jake's performance. The entrepreneur was now attempting to explain the finer points of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu strategy, his words revealing a superficial understanding that any serious practitioner would recognize immediately. But his audience was captivated, impressed by Jake's confidence and the mystique of martial arts expertise that few civilians understood well enough to question. Jake's challenge echoed through the empty gym like a bell that couldn't be unrung. Marcus stood motionless, his cleaning cloth still in his hands as he weighed his options. Walking away would mean losing his job, the income that kept Emma fed and housed and in school. But accepting Jake's provocation carried risks that extended far beyond employment, risks that could shatter the careful stability he had built around his daughter's needs. Tyler stepped forward hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating situation. "Maybe this isn't the best time for sparring," Tyler suggested, his young voice carrying more wisdom than his years would suggest. It's been a long evening for everyone. Jake whirled on Tyler with the fury of a man whose authority had been questioned one too many times. This doesn't concern you, Tyler. This is between me and the janitor here who thinks he knows better than everyone else. Marcus set down his cleaning supplies and faced Jake directly for the first time that evening. The entrepreneur was smaller than Marcus had realized. His gym membership and expensive athletic wear unable to disguise a soft frame built more for boardrooms than training mats. But Jake's eyes burned with the particular rage of someone who had never been truly tested and couldn't conceive of losing to someone he considered beneath him. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus said quietly, "I really think we should just call it a night. Your investors are gone, the gym is clean, and my daughter is waiting in the car." "Your daughter," Jake sneered. "Right. The little princess who thinks my gym is her personal study hall. Maybe it's time she learned that Daddy isn't the hero she thinks he is." The word struck Marcus like a physical blow, cutting through his professional composure with surgical precision. Jake had found the one pressure point that could override Marcus's careful self-control, the threat to his daughter's perception of him that went beyond mere employment concerns. Through the large windows, Emma could be seen closing her book and looking toward the gym with the intuitive awareness that children develop when their parents' routine is disrupted. She had learned to read her father's moods and situations with the precocious sensitivity of a child who had already lost one parent and lived in constant fear of losing another. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a familiar sensation from his years in uniform when diplomacy had failed and action became inevitable. Jake sensed the change immediately, his predatory instincts recognizing that his provocation had finally found its mark. "So what's it going to be, Marcus?" Jake pressed, his confidence growing as he interpreted Marcus's silence as weakness. "Are you going to step onto these mats like a man, or are you going to hide behind your mop and bucket like the coward you really are?" Tyler backed away from the confrontation, recognizing that the situation had moved beyond his ability to influence. He had trained enough to understand the basics of what was about to happen, and despite his limited experience, he could see qualities in Marcus that Jake seemed completely blind to. The way Marcus moved, the way he carried himself, the calm that never quite left his eyes even in moments of stress. Marcus looked once more toward Emma in the parking lot, then back at Jake's expectant face. His daughter had already witnessed too much disappointment in her short life, had already learned to accept less than she deserved because circumstances demanded it. But perhaps it was time for her to see that her father was capable of more than just quiet endurance. "All right, Mr. Morrison," Marcus said finally, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was agreeing to. "If you insist. But let's keep this friendly. Just a light roll to settle whatever needs settling." Jake's smile was triumphant and cruel, the expression of a bully who believed he had finally cornered his prey. He began removing his expensive suit jacket with theatrical ceremony, as if preparing for some grand performance rather than a simple training exercise. Marcus removed his work shirt and folded it carefully, revealing arms and shoulders that spoke of years spent maintaining physical conditioning despite the sedentary nature of his current employment. Jake paused in his own preparation, perhaps noticing for the first time that his opponent possessed a physicality that didn't match his humble profession. Tyler positioned himself where he could see both fighters clearly, his role as witness suddenly taking on greater significance than he had anticipated. The gym felt different now, charged with an energy that transformed the familiar training space into something resembling an arena where more than just physical superiority would be tested. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood at the edge of the training mats wearing a clean white GI with a black belt tied around his waist. The belt had been a gift from Sensei Rodriguez, who had insisted that Marcus's military rank and years of experience warranted recognition regardless of civilian certification requirements. Emma sat at a small desk in the corner of the training area, her homework spread before her as she worked with the quiet concentration that had become her trademark. The evening class was filled with Rodriguez's regular students, men and women who had come to elite combat specifically to train under the respected sensei's guidance. Marcus had spent the past 3 weeks learning their names, understanding their individual strengths and weaknesses, and developing the teaching methods that would help them advance their own martial arts journey. Jake had initially threatened legal action over Marcus's departure from his janitorial position, but his bluster had evaporated when Rodriguez calmly explained the employment law implications of retaliating against a worker who had been publicly humiliated by his supervisor. The entrepreneur now avoided the training areas when Rodriguez's classes were in session, his presence in his own facility reduced to administrative duties and private sessions with the few students who hadn't witnessed his technical inadequacy. Tyler had immediately requested to transfer his training to Rodriguez's program, eager to learn from instructors who possessed genuine expertise rather than purchased credentials. His progress in the past 3 weeks had been remarkable, his natural athleticism finally guided by proper technique and principled instruction. Marcus worked with a small group of advanced students, demonstrating the subtle details of guard retention that separated competent grapplers from exceptional ones. His teaching style was patient and methodical, drawing from years of military instruction where lives depended on students mastering complex skills under pressure. The evening's training session concluded with the traditional bow of respect, and Marcus's students began gathering their equipment and preparing to leave. Several approached him with questions about technique or requests for additional guidance, interactions that reminded Marcus of the satisfaction he had once found in developing junior Marines and preparing them for the challenges they would face. Emma finished her homework and began packing her supplies with the same careful organization she applied to everything in her young life. Her math scores had improved dramatically since Rodriguez had arranged for her to work with a tutoring program staffed by college students who trained at the academy. The intellectual stimulation and additional academic support were helping her achieve the potential that her father had always recognized but had been unable to fully nurture. Rodriguez approached Marcus as the last students departed, his expression reflecting the satisfaction of a teacher who had made a significant discovery. "Your students respect you already," Rodriguez observed. "They understand that you possess knowledge worth learning from." Marcus nodded gratefully, still adjusting to the transformation from invisible service worker to valued instructor. The past 3 weeks had restored something in him that he hadn't realized had been lost, a sense of purpose and recognition that extended beyond merely earning enough money to survive. If this story of hidden strength inspired you, let us know where you're listening from and subscribe for more stories of triumph. The thought crossed Marcus's mind as he considered how dramatically their circumstances had changed, though he kept his focus on the immediate satisfaction of meaningful work and his daughter's happiness. Emma approached her father with her backpack properly organized and her jacket in hand. She had grown more confident in recent weeks, her academic success and the obvious respect shown to her father combining to create a sense of stability that had been missing since her mother's death. "Ready to go home, Daddy?" Emma asked, though her tone suggested contentment rather than eagerness to leave. The academy had become a second home for both of them, a place where Marcus's capabilities were recognized and Emma's potential was nurtured. Rodriguez handed Marcus an envelope containing information about an upcoming tournament where several of his students planned to compete. "Your military background would be invaluable in preparing them for competition pressure," Rodriguez explained. "I hope you will consider coaching them through the experience." Marcus accepted the envelope with gratitude, understanding that Rodriguez was offering him opportunities to continue growing as an instructor and mentor. The tournament would be Emma's first chance to watch her father in an official coaching capacity, a moment that would complete the transformation from their previous circumstances to their current possibilities. As they prepared to leave elite combat that evening, Marcus reflected on the unpredictable nature of recognition and opportunity. 3 weeks ago, he had been invisible, dismissed, and undervalued despite possessing capabilities that few people would ever develop. Tonight, he was respected, recognized, and valued for exactly the same skills and character traits that had always defined him. Emma took her father's hand as they walked toward their car, her small grip conveying the security and pride that came from knowing her father was appreciated for his true worth. The evening air was cool and comfortable, and their future stretched ahead of them with possibilities that neither had dared to imagine just a few weeks before. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Marcus's small apartment, casting gentle shadows across the kitchen table where Sophia and Elena sat eating their cereal with the focused determination that 80-year-olds brought to important tasks like avoiding the soggy pieces at the bottom of the bowl. Marcus poured coffee into his favorite mug, a chipped ceramic piece that Elena had painted for him at school with the words, "World's Best Dad," in uneven purple letters. His hands were steady, showing no sign of the adrenaline that had coursed through them just 8 hours earlier during his encounter with Derek Manning. "Daddy, you look tired," Sophia observed, her dark eyes studying his face with the perceptive intensity she had inherited from her mother. "Did you have a long night at work?" Marcus sat down across from his daughters, considering how much to tell them. He had learned that children could handle more truth than most adults gave them credit for, but he also knew that his job security was precarious enough without worrying them unnecessarily. "I had to help someone last night," he said carefully, watching their reactions. "A student who was being bothered by some other students. Sometimes people don't treat each other very nicely." Elena frowned, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "Like when Tommy Peterson pushed me at recess?" "Something like that," Marcus agreed. "But this was bigger kids, and the girl was scared." "Did you use your soldier skills?" Sophia asked, her voice filled with the kind of odd curiosity that made Marcus's heart swell with pride and worry in equal measure. Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. His daughters knew he had been in the army, though he had never shared the darker details of his service. To them, Daddy was a hero who had protected people far away, and sometimes Marcus wished he could see himself through their innocent eyes instead of through the lens of his own guilt and trauma. "I used my training to make sure everyone stayed safe," he said. "But sometimes when you do the right thing, there can be consequences. The boy I stopped comes from a very wealthy family, and they might try to get me in trouble for helping." Both girls went very still, their cereal forgotten. Marcus realized he had said too much, let his own anxiety bleed through into their safe morning routine. "Are you going to lose your job?" Elena whispered, her voice small and frightened. The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. These two little girls had already lost their mother, had already been forced to grow up too fast in too many ways. The thought that his need to protect a stranger might cost them their home, their stability, their father's presence, made his stomach clench with familiar guilt. "I don't know, sweetheart," he admitted, because lying to them felt worse than sharing his uncertainty. "I hope not. But even if something happens with this job, Daddy will find another one. We'll be okay." Sophia reached across the table and grabbed his hand with both of hers, her small fingers surprisingly strong. "You did the right thing, Daddy. Mama always said you do the right thing." The simple faith in her voice nearly broke him. Maria had indeed always said that, even when his nightmares kept them both awake, even when his PTSD made him distant and difficult to live with, even during those dark months when he couldn't understand why he had survived Afghanistan while better men hadn't. His phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, and Marcus saw his supervisor's name on the screen. David Chen, the night shift coordinator, rarely called during daylight hours unless something serious was happening. "Marcus, I need you to come in early today," David's voice was tight with stress. "We've got a situation developing around last night's incident. The Manning family is making noise, and administration wants to see you." Marcus felt his daughter's eyes on him as he listened to his supervisor explain that Derek's father had already called the university president, threatening lawsuits and donation withdrawals if Marcus wasn't immediately terminated. The family was claiming excessive force, harassment, and discrimination, painting their son as the victim of an overzealous security guard with anger management issues. "I understand," Marcus said quietly into the phone. "What time do you need me there?" 2 o'clock. "And Marcus?" "Bring a representative if you have one. This isn't going to be a friendly conversation." After hanging up, Marcus looked at his daughters, who were watching him with the kind of serious expressions that should never appear on 80-year-old faces. They had learned to read his moods the way children of single parents always did, becoming experts in adult emotions out of necessity. "Is that about the mean boy?" Elena asked. "How do you explain to children that sometimes doing the right thing costs more than you can afford to pay?" "Yes, baby," Marcus said. "But whatever happens, we're going to be fine. We're Rivera girls, right? We stick together." "Rivera girls and one boy," Sophia corrected with a small smile that reminded him so much of Maria it made his chest ache. The university administration building hummed with the kind of tense energy that preceded difficult decisions. In the security office on the third floor, David Chen sat across from his computer screen, reviewing the incident footage for the sixth time that morning while fielding increasingly aggressive phone calls from the Manning family's lawyers. The video was crystal clear, shot in high definition by the campus security cameras and supplemented by multiple student phone recordings that had already begun circulating on social media. There was no ambiguity about what had happened. Derek Manning had assaulted a female student, threatened a security officer, and then physically attacked that officer when challenged. What made David's jaw clench with frustration was the complete disconnect between what the footage showed and what the Manning family was claiming. According to their version of events, relayed through high-priced attorneys, Marcus Rivera was a dangerous individual with anger management issues who had used excessive force against an innocent student engaged in harmless conversation. The phone rang again, and David recognized the extension for the university president's office. This would be the fourth call in 2 hours, each one more urgent than the last as pressure mounted from the board of trustees. "David, I need that incident report on my desk in the next hour," President Williams said without preamble. "The Manning family is threatening to pull their endowment funding if we don't take immediate action. We're talking about $12 million in contributions over the past 5 years. David rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar tension headache that came with trying to balance institutional politics with basic human decency. "Sir, the footage clearly shows that Officer Rivera acted appropriately. The student was being harassed, and Rivera used minimal force only after being physically assaulted himself." "I understand that," President Williams replied, though his tone suggested he wished the facts were different. "But we're in a delicate position here. The Manning family has significant influence with our donors and board members. If they decide to make this a public relations nightmare." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on David's office door. His assistant peered in with an expression of barely controlled excitement. "Sir, Dr. James Chen is here to see you. He says it's about the incident last night." David felt his stomach drop. Dr. Chen was arguably the most influential member of the university's board of trustees, a tech billionaire whose donations had funded the new computer science building and whose company regularly recruited their top graduates. If he was here to add pressure about the Manning situation, Marcus Rivera's career was effectively over. "Send him in," David said, ending his call with the president and straightening his tie. Dr. Chen entered the office with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. He was younger than David had expected, probably in his early 50s, with the kind of precise grooming that spoke of considerable wealth and attention to detail. "Mr. Chen, thank you for coming in," David began, prepared to launch into damage control mode. "I assume you're here about the incident involving Derek Manning. I want to assure you that we're taking this very seriously and conducting a thorough investigation." Dr. Chen held up a hand to stop him. "Actually, I'm here about Officer Rivera." David's heart sank. If Dr. Chen was here to advocate for Derek Manning, Marcus didn't stand a chance. The university would sacrifice one security guard without hesitation to preserve relationships with their biggest donors. "I've reviewed the security footage," Dr. Chen continued, his voice calm and measured. "I've also spoken with several witnesses, including my daughter Rebecca." The words hit David like a thunderbolt. Rebecca Chen. The student Marcus had protected was Dr. James Chen's daughter. Suddenly, the entire political landscape of the situation had shifted in ways that David's mind was still struggling to process. "Your daughter?" David repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Rebecca Chen, sophomore pre-med student," Dr. Chen confirmed. "The young woman your Officer Rivera protected from what appears to have been an attempted sexual assault by Mr. Manning." Dr. Chen moved to the window overlooking the quad where the incident had taken place just hours earlier. "My daughter called me at 3 this morning, crying. Not because of what Derek Manning did to her, though that was traumatic enough. She was crying because she was terrified that the man who protected her was going to lose his job for doing the right thing." David felt the ground shifting beneath his feet as he began to understand the true implications of the situation. Sir, I had no idea Rebecca was your daughter. She's not listed under your name in our records. She uses her mother's maiden name at school, Dr. Chen explained. We thought it would help her avoid exactly the kind of preferential treatment that allows people like Derek Manning to believe they're above consequences. Dr. Chen pulled out his phone and showed David the security footage he had requested from the university's IT department earlier that morning. The high-definition video played in slow motion, capturing every detail of the confrontation with devastating clarity. Watch Derek's body language here, Dr. Chen said, pointing to the screen. This isn't playful teasing or innocent flirtation. This is predatory behavior. He's systematically cutting off her escape routes, using his size to intimidate her, and escalating when she resists. David watched Derek grab Rebecca's textbook and throw it to his friend, saw the way Rebecca flinched when Derek stepped into her personal space, observed the tears of frustration building in her eyes as the situation spiraled beyond her control. And here, Dr. Chen continued, advancing the footage. Officer Rivera attempts verbal de-escalation for nearly 2 full minutes before Derek makes physical contact. Even after being shoved, Rivera gives multiple warnings before defending himself. The video showed Marcus's restraint in stunning detail. His movements were precise and controlled, designed to neutralize the threat without causing unnecessary harm. There was no anger in his technique, no excessive force, just the smooth efficiency of someone trained to handle dangerous situations with minimal collateral damage. This man saved my daughter from what could have been a serious assault, Dr. Chen said quietly. And according to Rebecca, he did it knowing that intervening could cost him his job. That takes a special kind of courage. David nodded slowly, beginning to understand why Dr. Chen had requested this private meeting. What can I tell you about Officer Rivera's background? Dr. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. I've already done some research. Marcus Rivera, 34 years old, Army Ranger with 3 combat deployments. Bronze Star and Purple Heart recipient. Honorably discharged after an IED explosion that killed 2 members of his unit. Widowed 2 years ago when his wife was killed by a drunk driver. The clinical recitation of Marcus's personal tragedies hung heavy in the air between them. David had known that Marcus was a veteran, but he hadn't realized the extent of his service or the losses he had endured. He works the night shift so he can be home when his twin daughters get ready for school, Dr. Chen continued. According to his employment file, he's never missed a shift, never filed a complaint, and has consistently received excellent performance reviews. The kind of employee most organizations would consider invaluable. David felt a growing sense of unease about the pressure the university was receiving from the Manning family. Dr. Chen, I should mention that we've been getting significant pushback about Officer Rivera's actions. The Manning family is threatening to withdraw their support from the university if we don't take disciplinary action. Dr. Chen's expression hardened slightly. The Manning family has contributed approximately $2 million to this university over the past decade. While that's certainly generous, it's hardly irreplaceable funding. He paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. My family's contributions over the same period total $18 million. And unlike the Mannings, we've never used our donations as leverage to protect our children from the consequences of their actions. The message was clear without being explicitly stated. In the complex mathematics of university politics, Dr. Chen's influence far outweighed anything the Manning family could threaten. What would you like me to do? David asked. I want to meet Officer Rivera, Dr. Chen said. Not in an official capacity, not as part of some investigation. I want to thank him personally for protecting my daughter when she couldn't protect herself. David checked his watch. Marcus would be arriving soon for his meeting with administration, probably expecting to be fired and possibly arrested. Instead, he was about to discover that his act of courage had earned him the gratitude of one of the most powerful people associated with the university. He'll be here at 2 o'clock, David said. But Dr. Chen, he doesn't know Rebecca is your daughter. She asked that we not reveal her family connections unless absolutely necessary. Dr. Chen smiled for the first time since entering the office. Then I suppose this will be as much of a surprise for him as it is for the Manning family. Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing turn out to be the same thing after all. Outside the office windows, students moved across the quad in the lazy patterns of afternoon classes and study groups. None of them knew that the balance of power on their campus had shifted dramatically overnight, or that a security guard's moment of courage was about to change everything for both the protector and the protected. Marcus walked through the administration building with the measured pace of someone who had learned to face difficult situations with dignity and tact. He wore his best khaki pants and a button-down shirt that Elena had helped him iron that morning, her small hands guiding the iron under his careful supervision while Sophia offered commentary on proper collar technique. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock, which gave him just enough time to arrange after-school care for his daughters if this conversation ended with his termination. He had spent the morning updating his resume and researching other security positions in the area, though none offered the schedule flexibility that had made his current job so perfect for single parenthood. David Chen met him in the hallway outside the security office, his expression unreadable. "Marcus, thank you for coming in. There's someone who wants to meet you before we go into the formal meeting." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Another lawyer, probably, or perhaps a representative from the Manning family there to deliver ultimatums in person. He followed David down the hall to a conference room where a well-dressed Asian man in his 50s sat reviewing papers at the polished oak table. "Marcus Rivera, I'd like you to meet Dr. James Chen," David said. "Dr. Chen serves on our board of trustees." Marcus stepped forward and extended his hand, his military training automatically shifting him into the respectful posture he had used when meeting commanding officers. "Dr. Chen, it's an honor to meet you, sir." Dr. Chen stood and shook Marcus's hand with a firm grip, his eyes studying the younger man's face with an intensity that suggested this was more than a casual introduction. "Officer Rivera, the honor is entirely mine. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did last night." Confusion flickered across Marcus's features. "Sir?" "The young woman you protected," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Rebecca Chen. She's my daughter." Marcus felt the world shift slightly, as if he had been standing on solid ground that suddenly revealed itself to be a ship's deck in rolling seas. Rebecca was Dr. Chen's daughter. The girl he had protected was connected to one of the most powerful people at the university, though she had given no indication of her family's influence or wealth. "I had no idea," Marcus said honestly. "She never mentioned. I mean, I would have helped her regardless, but I had no idea who she was." "That's exactly why I wanted to meet you," Dr. Chen replied. "Rebecca told me you risked your job to protect a complete stranger. That you intervened knowing it could cost you everything, simply because it was the right thing to do." Dr. Chen gestured for Marcus to sit down, then took the chair across from him rather than the power position at the head of the table. "I've spent the morning learning about you, Officer Rivera. Your military service, your family situation, your exemplary work record here at the university. I've also learned about the pressure you're facing from the Manning family." Marcus straightened in his chair, prepared for whatever consequences were about to fall. "Sir, I understand that wealthy donors have influence. If my actions last night have created problems for the university, I'm prepared to resign rather than cause further difficulties." The offer seemed to surprise Dr. Chen. "You're willing to give up your job to avoid causing problems for the institution?" "I have 2 daughters to think about," Marcus explained. "If staying here means constant legal battles and negative publicity for the university, that's not fair to anyone. I'll find another way to provide for them." Dr. Chen leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Tell me about your daughters." For the next several minutes, Marcus found himself sharing stories about Sophia and Elena, their personalities and dreams, their resilience in the face of losing their mother, their unwavering faith in their father despite all the challenges they faced together. Dr. Chen listened with the focused attention of someone who understood the weight of parental responsibility. "They sound remarkable," Dr. Chen said when Marcus finished. "Much like my Rebecca, actually. She's been struggling with anxiety since starting college, partly because of ongoing harassment from students like Derek Manning. Last night was the first time she felt safe enough to study late in the library in months. The revelation hit Marcus with unexpected force. He had thought he was simply stopping one incident, but apparently Rebecca had been suffering in silence for much longer than anyone realized. The truth is, Officer Rivera, you didn't just protect my daughter last night, Dr. Chen continued. You gave her back her freedom to learn and grow without fear. That's a gift I can never adequately repay. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the gratitude in the older man's voice. Sir, any decent person would have done the same thing. Would they? Dr. Chen asked. Because according to my daughter, she's reported Derek's behavior to university staff multiple times over the past semester. And yet somehow, nothing was ever done about it. Sometimes the people we least expect become our greatest advocates. The implication hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of institutional failure and the courage of one man's decision to act when others had chosen to look away. The formal hearing convened in the university's main conference room at 3 o'clock, with President Williams presiding over a table that included representatives from legal affairs, student conduct, and campus security. Derek Manning sat at one end with his father Robert Manning and two expensive attorneys, their collective presence radiating the kind of barely contained fury that came from people unaccustomed to having their authority questioned. Marcus entered the room flanked by David Chen and, to everyone's surprise, Dr. James Chen himself. The sight of the board's most influential member sitting beside a security guard sent visible shock waves through the Manning contingent, their confident expressions faltering as they tried to process this unexpected development. Before we begin, Dr. Chen announced, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone whose word could reshape the university's future with a single phone call, I want it understood that I am here as Rebecca Chen's father, advocating for the man who protected my daughter from assault. Robert Manning's face went pale as the implications hit him. His son had not only attacked a security guard, but had been harassing the daughter of the university's biggest donor. The careful narrative his lawyers had constructed about Derek being victimized by an overzealous employee suddenly seemed not just false, but catastrophically naive. There's been a misunderstanding, Robert Manning began, his voice losing its earlier bluster. If we had known that Derek's interaction involved Dr. Chen's daughter. The identity of the victim shouldn't matter, Dr. Chen interrupted coldly. My daughter deserves protection because she's a human being, not because of who her father is. Just as every other student on this campus deserves to feel safe. President Williams cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should review the evidence systematically. For the next hour, they examined security footage from multiple angles, reviewed witness statements, and listened to testimony from students who had observed Derek's pattern of harassment over the previous semester. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of systematic predatory behavior that had been enabled by institutional indifference and Derek's family wealth. Marcus answered questions about his actions with the same calm professionalism he had shown during military debriefings, explaining his decision-making process and the minimal force techniques he had employed. His military record was read into the proceedings, including commendations for valor and leadership under fire that made Derek's claims of excessive force seem absurd. Derek himself remained largely silent, his earlier bravado replaced by the sullen realization that his usual advantages were not going to save him this time. When pressed to explain his actions, he mumbled something about misunderstandings and college pranks, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. The evidence is clear, President Williams finally announced. Mr. Derek Manning is hereby expelled from this university effective immediately. All privileges and access are revoked, and he is banned from campus property pending possible criminal charges. Robert Manning shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. This is outrageous. You're destroying my son's future over some security guard's power trip. We'll sue this university into the ground. Actually, Dr. Chen said calmly, standing to face the older Manning directly, you'll find that your legal options are quite limited. The evidence of your son's assault on a university employee and harassment of a student is overwhelming. Any lawsuit you file will require depositions from all witnesses, including my daughter, which will make Derek's behavior a matter of public record. The threat was delivered with such quiet certainty that Robert Manning seemed to deflate before their eyes. His lawyers exchanged glances that suggested they had already reached the same conclusion about the futility of legal action. However, Dr. Chen continued, his tone softening slightly, "I'm not interested in destroying your family. I'm interested in making sure this behavior stops and that the institutions we support actually protect the vulnerable instead of enabling their predators." He turned to address the entire room. "This incident has revealed systematic failures in how we handle student safety and harassment complaints. I'm proposing the creation of a new campus safety and intervention program, with Officer Rivera as its director." The announcement sent another shock wave through the room. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat as the implications sank in. Not only was he keeping his job, but he was being offered a promotion that would use his military training and experience to protect other students. A program focused on crisis intervention, de-escalation training, and support for vulnerable students, Dr. Chen explained. Led by someone who has proven he'll do the right thing even when it's difficult. 3 months later, Marcus Rivera sat in his new office on the second floor of the campus safety building, reviewing applications from military veterans interested in joining the crisis intervention program he was developing. The nameplate on his door read, "Director of Campus Safety and Student Protection," words that still felt surreal every time he saw them. The afternoon sun streamed through windows that overlooked the same quad where his life had changed on that November night. Students moved across the pathways with the unhurried confidence of people who felt genuinely safe in their environment, a transformation that had occurred gradually as word spread about the new zero-tolerance policy for harassment and the dedicated team trained to enforce it. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts, and Rebecca Chen peered around the door frame with the same cautious expression she had worn that night in the study area. But now her eyes held confidence instead of fear, and her smile was genuine rather than forced. "Mr. Rivera? Do you have a minute?" "Of course, Rebecca. Come in." Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same spot where he had interviewed 3 other harassment victims that week, helping them navigate the new reporting system that actually resulted in consequences instead of empty promises. Rebecca settled into the chair and placed a thick envelope on his desk. "I wanted to give you this before I leave for winter break. It's my acceptance letter to Johns Hopkins Medical School. Early admission." Marcus felt a surge of pride that surprised him with its intensity. "Rebecca, that's incredible. Congratulations. Your father must be thrilled." "He is," she said, her smile widening. "But I wanted you to know that I almost didn't apply. After months of dealing with Derek and feeling like I couldn't control anything in my environment, I had started to doubt whether I was strong enough for medical school." She paused, her expression growing serious. "What you did that night didn't just save me from Derek. It reminded me that there are still people willing to stand up for what's right, even when it costs them something. That gave me back my confidence." Before Marcus could respond, another knock came at his door. Sophia and Elena burst in with the irrepressible energy of 80-year-olds released from school, their backpacks bouncing as they ran to hug their father. "Daddy, can we see your office again?" Sophia asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "I want to show Elena the picture you put up of Mama." Marcus chuckled as his daughters explored the space that had become as familiar to them as their own home. The walls displayed his military commendations alongside photos of other veterans who had joined his team, creating a gallery of second chances and renewed purpose. "Girls, I'd like you to meet Miss Rebecca," Marcus said. "She's going to be a doctor someday." Elena studied Rebecca with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Are you the girl Daddy helped when the mean boy was being scary?" Rebecca knelt down to Elena's level, her expression gentle. "Yes, I am. Your daddy is a hero. He helped me when I was scared, even though he didn't know me." "We know," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "Daddy helps people. That's what he does." The simple statement hung in the air with the weight of absolute truth. Marcus had spent months questioning whether his decision to intervene had been worth the risk, whether protecting a stranger justified potentially destabilizing his daughters' lives. But looking at Rebecca's acceptance letter, at the confidence that had returned to her voice, at the other students who now felt safe enough to report harassment because they knew someone would actually listen. He finally understood that some choices were bigger than personal consequences. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, his arrival perfectly timed as always. "I hope I'm not interrupting a celebration." "Rebecca got into Johns Hopkins," Marcus announced, his voice filled with genuine pride. "I heard," Dr. Chen said, moving to embrace his daughter. "Though I suspect her acceptance letter isn't the only good news we'll be celebrating today." He turned to Marcus with the expression of someone about to share a secret. "The board voted this morning to expand your program university-wide. Full funding for 5 additional staff members, enhanced training resources, and partnership agreements with 3 other colleges who want to implement similar programs." Marcus felt the words wash over him like a wave of possibility he hadn't dared to imagine. From a job that barely paid the bills to leading a program that could protect students across multiple campuses, all because he had chosen to help someone who needed it. "There's more," Dr. Chen continued. "We're establishing the Maria Rivera Memorial Scholarship for children of single parents pursuing higher education." Rebecca suggested the name. "If this story has touched your heart, let us know where you're listening from and what acts of everyday heroism you've witnessed in your own life. Sometimes one moment of courage can change everything." As the sun set over the campus, casting long shadows across the quad where it all began, Marcus Rivera realized that protecting others hadn't cost him his future after all. It had given him one.